Hey, my name's Julian Faust. Welcome to the Profits and Panels podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mike Parker. Mike, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Julian. Excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, me too. Can you start by taking us back to when you started your business? What piqued your interest in solar and how did you initially get started there?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a little over a 5-year journey with Loki Solar at this point. So I've always been really interested in renewable energy, and I actually started my career at a company that did consulting for hydropower and doing a lot of small power projects and everything. So in 2020, a good friend of mine, Ryan, to me that maybe we should build a solar farm together. And it was a friendship where we always talk about business ideas and think they were great, and then you do the spreadsheet and it turns out maybe not the best opportunity. But at that point, solar in Maine was really taking off, particularly the community solar market in the state. And there were some really great opportunities to do community solar development. So Ryan and I launched into the adventure of starting Loki Solar nights and weekends. And during the pandemic, there wasn't a lot else to do besides hang out with the kids and then work my day job and then work the Loki Solar job. So fortunate to get lots of support from my wife in picking up the slack as I was kind of trying to make things work on a part-time basis for a long time for the first 3 years. And then once we had sold a couple projects, and now I'm able to run the company full time. And we've got a small team now, and we're really rolling, which is great.
Nice, yeah. And a little bit off topic, but where's the name come from, Loki? I have an idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a great dog that has unfortunately since passed of my friend Ryan. I think maybe was 16 years old when he passed away. So it's kind of in remembrance of that great dog. There was an interesting time period where the show was being launched, Loki, and I never experienced something about how much everyone can know about a thing due to mass media, but everyone thought that we were a Marvel character for about 6 months. And you can tell when they start all the advertising and you tell when they stop because everyone knows and everyone's thinking about the Norse god and the Marvel character. And then when they stop putting all the effort behind it, no one thinks about it anymore. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that was my guess. I did not expect the dog, so that's a nice way to commemorate the
Yeah,
poor
for
pup.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So within the business, like day to day, what are your responsibilities specifically when it comes to driving growth and expanding the business to be better than what it is?
Yeah, so like I said, that's really evolved in the last couple of years, which has been exciting. So it went from me doing everything, including walking around the woods of Maine, trying to see if a piece of land would be good to put solar on, like literally walking through the woods, to now we have a team. So there's 6 of us in the business full time now. So I really had to evolve into more of a leadership role. So a lot of what I'm doing is coaching and trying to support the team's growth, all the way from the process of finding new sites that we might be able to develop community solar on, through the process of reaching out and engaging landowners to make agreements, all the way through interconnection, so getting permission to connect to the grid and doing all the permitting we have to do. So I'm really in a coaching role through to our team, that does each one of those functions, which has been really rewarding and fun and challenging because you realize the things that it just takes a lot of effort to communicate, and you realize where all your own blind spots are when you're trying to duplicate those efforts in someone else. So on top of that, I also do lots of kind of research about where we should develop next and what is going on in the market overall, so then we can best direct the money that we have invested to projects that are going to have the most likely chance of success and the best returns for us. And I also am very engaged with reaching out because really what we do is we originate, so we find land and we develop that land for community solar projects. So those are usually in the 1 to 5 megawatt sort of size range on the distribution system. So I spend a lot of time talking with people who are going to buy those projects from us because we usually develop them up to the point where they can be built and then sell them to a partner to build, own, and operate them. So I do quite a bit of time talking to ultimately the person that's our end customer, which is the person that's going to buy that project when it's ready to be built and build us the various markets that we work in. So those are kind of my main things.
And so, how are you guys? I know that you said you know a lot of players in this market already because you develop a decent chunk of the land. How are you guys looking to expand and grow even larger?
Yeah, well, really our expansion and really diversification. So in the first round of projects, we had all of our projects were in one utility, in one state, in one program that kept changing, and that's a lot of concentration of investment and risks. So a big part of our expansion is expanding into additional states where community solar is a is an active program. So we started out in Maine and we're still active in Maine. We're also developing projects in New York, Pennsylvania, and Illinois at this point. And then we're looking into there's a couple more community solar markets that are looking like they might open up in the next year or two. So we're looking into adding additional markets, but really expanding geographically is great because it spreads out our risk if state programs change or things become more or less favorable different places. We have more places we can participate, and there's different buyers across those different markets that we can work with. So that's a good diversification too.
What about a specific market is intriguing because it seems like you're sort of north, like northeast, and then you pop out a little bit more towards Illinois over there.
Yeah.
So I know it's a popular solar market, but like, what about it makes it like I want to be there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say what made us go further afield than we would have otherwise is the program has just a lot of political support. And so community solar is, it's a program that's usually it's created by law on a state to state basis basically. So and I would say Illinois really stands behind their program from a state political standpoint, and there's some good runway to build more projects there. Maine, and that's a little bit in contrast to Maine, where the program has maybe started out very large, and the state legislature has actually been like trying to make some moves to reduce how much community solar gets built in the state over time. So, similar for, I would say Illinois and New York are the community solar markets that probably have the most kind of state government, let's say, backing and kind of long-term stability. It also means that lots of other developers are there working on projects, so it's competitive to find good sites and to develop those sites in a manner where we can connect them to the grid and permit them well.
You said Maine is sort of trying to slow down on the community solar projects, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? What's the incentive for them to do such a thing?
Well, when the program started, the incentives were strong and there was a good opportunity to develop a lot of community solar. And I would say the amount of community solar that was getting developed might have been above what like the legislative idea was that would get developed. So that they've changed a bunch of things to try to basically rein that back in. And that's created some challenges, I would say, because people, when you're doing investments in large projects like solar projects that take a long time, those changes can be challenging. But yeah, I think it's really just more community solar got developed than what the folks were thinking, in Augusta were thinking would. So they've tried to scale it back, which has created some challenges and some opportunities for developers.
Okay, and as you continue to expand into these other states, how are you finding new leads or how are you marketing to all these new solar developer, not developers, but maybe installers and like making them aware of your business and what you do?
Yeah, I would say the good thing is a lot of the folks that we've been in conversations with about selling projects, are, active in these states because they're strong community solar states. So if a company is building and owning and operating community solar assets in one state, they're probably also aware of these other good markets and are pretty active. So not everyone is everywhere, I would say, but out of the folks we talk to, it's a pretty good coverage because a lot of these folks are investing nationally in community solar, so they're active over a lot of different markets.
Okay. And with all that happening, like what's the biggest challenge you're facing while you're expanding there?
I would say that the biggest challenge for community solar generally is basically in strong markets finding places where we can interconnect to the grid at a reasonable cost. And there's a huge variation. Like for example, one main project that we have, it's costing like just under a little bit under $100,000 to connect to the grid, and on another main project, it's almost $1 million to connect to the grid. So that sort of variance is huge. So we just really and sometimes it can be many millions of dollars to connect a community solar project to the grid, which really challenges the economics and probably doesn't allow that project to work. So a lot of what we focus on is trying to find creative ways to find geographies and places where we can connect to the grid in a reason at a reasonable cost, so the project economics still work. And I would say also in the more popular markets, I think just finding landowners that want to work with us, especially as we're newer to the market, can be a challenge too, because there might be more established players doing outreach to the same landowners.
So when you connect to the grid, it's sometimes expensive. Is that when you're in these more rural areas?
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes if you're too far out in a rural area, you might be on a weaker part of the distribution system, and you might have to do a lot of improvements to that distribution system to connect. But it also could be because even if you're on a stronger part of the distribution system, there might be other projects that are already using that capacity. So you might have to do upgrades just because there's already other solar projects there, or there might just be the grid might not be super strong in that particular location, or the substation that you're connecting to might need technology upgrades that you have to pay for to interconnect. So there's a lot of different there's a lot. So we've seen projects that work and projects that don't work, and we try our best to kind of pattern match and develop in places where we think it's going to be economical to make that connection.
Okay, yeah, got you. And so back to more of the business side of like growing and improving, what metrics are you looking to improve within the business in the upcoming months?
Yeah, I would say I was just thinking earlier about some goal setting, and I would say, just delivering projects in a quicker time frame, I would say. So just trying to make sure we're moving stuff through the process as quickly as possible. And just to be honest, oftentimes I can be a bottleneck in that time frame. So thinking about how are we making decisions more quickly? How can I just be more clear and more decisive on things and move projects forward? That's a big, I would say, goal for improvement. Another goal is we do a lot of landowner outreach for people who own land that might want to lease the land or sell the land to build a solar project on. And I would say thinking about thinking about that outreach effort and trying to improve conversion is a something that we're going to be thinking about, because we can go and look at where it might be good to build and maybe have thousands of names, and we can sometimes end up with tens or something of people who really want to work together and partner on a site. So really, looking at how we're doing that outreach, how good the contact information quality is we're even getting in that research, so we can get a hold of people to start the conversation. Those are all things that we're thinking about improving over time.
And you mentioned that not the you mentioned that you want to speed up that delivery process a little bit. And I know you said you're blaming yourself a little bit, saying you're a bottleneck and stuff. But when it comes to the systems, are you looking to improve that in some way?
The systems as far as the business systems, or the systems as far or like the technical.
Business systems.
Yeah, I would say we definitely are, and we've recently kind of done a little bit of organizational shifting where we've taken two folks that are kind of more at an individual contributor and move them more into like positions with some more global responsibility around project delivery, and one around finding new potential sites and everything. So I think that that's really an evolution that's happening in our business right now, is kind of going from a bunch of people that report to Mike and like those conversations to more like, responsibilities over certain business areas, and really trying to support those two individuals as far as setting their own goals and trying to give that, pass down some decision making and, prioritization sort of responsibilities that I think, are already really showing some good results for moving things more quickly, because then it's not just like tasks come from me and back to me and kind of get stuck with me for a while. If I can have more strategic conversations with those two individuals, it just helps things move more smoothly because I'm out of the loop. Getting me out of the loop on a lot of stuff, I think has been good and will continue to bear fruit.
And so would that be more so teaching the people who work for you at the moment to go be a little bit more independent, or is that on your side saying like, hey, I have to let them, I'm controlling too much myself. I have to let them do their thing.
Always a two. I think it's always like a two-way thing, and I'm lucky to have folks that are excited to step into that role and take on some more responsibility. And I think it's just an evolution because both of those individuals I hired to help with certain types of work in the business, either like finding, going and doing the actual site lead research, and we were working very closely together to develop how to do that over time, or another individual that was doing more like, drawings and you know, more detailed engineer sort of work, technical documentation sort of work. So it was just kind of, I would say, over time, there's a comfort level and a relationship gets built and a trust level that gets built. So then everyone feels more comfortable and they understand because they've been doing the work. They understand how it gets done and how to make those decisions and ultimately how to lead other folks to do it. So I think it's kind of organically happened over time. And sometimes it's always nice to think you could just jump right to the level where the person's running that function, but it does take some time for them to learn and get the perspective and for us to just get the rapport where that's working well. So it seemed like the right time, and it's definitely sped things up in a nice way.
Yeah, I understand completely. So in the next, let's say a year from today, whether it's having a certain revenue goal or expansion to maybe having a greater team size or maybe expanding to a greater number of states, do you have a set goal in mind where you want to be?
Yeah, I think like I said, I was doing some goal setting earlier today, and I think having some more clarity around exactly what the goals are is a goal of mine. But I would say it's likely that a couple, two or so more community solar markets will open up in the next year or two. So even planting some early seeds and getting some sites lined up in those markets in the next year or so, and then being able to really be active as those get rolling is definitely a goal of ours. And I would say now, now that we have some of those folks in leadership positions, I think it really lets us scale the team more. So I can definitely see we'll add two more team members, so we'll be to eight by the end of this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's one or two more next. So maybe by the end of next year, it might be a 10-person team. So, and this year we'll probably deliver around 6 projects or so. And I could see that growing to maybe 10 or 12 in 2026, something like that. So I would say we have pretty moderate sort of growth expectations, but a lot of it's because these projects are long cycles. So from the time we like reach out to, or like the time we're looking for landowners to work with to the time we're selling a project, is usually on a 2 year or so cycle.
Hmm.
We kind of have to always be planting more seeds today if we want to experience that growth later. So yeah, so that's what we're working to do: get some more people researching and looking in more places, I would say.
So with those two, like 1 to 2 markets, the community solar markets you see opening up in like the next year, within those markets, what are you doing when it comes to making people aware of the business, whether it's advertising or like content creation, showing that, hey, I want to be the guy who's developing in this market. Come to me for business.
Yeah, we're not a super public. I guess we're not a super public business because we're very focused, I would say, and it's a small team, so we're not selling to. It's very B2B focused, right? So I would say that what I'm trying to do is just be actively reaching out and expanding my market within community solar so that I'm talking to as many of the folks that are also developing sites in those markets just to learn the best of what they're knowing how to do and sharing what we're learning as well as talking with the same folks that might want to build and operate those projects long term in those markets. So I would say, you know similar to when I was selling engineering services at the consulting company that I worked at for a long time. It's a lot more directed and focused outreach in B2B, I think. You really want to find, it might only be a couple dozen people that are like your key customers, and you just want to be having an ongoing conversation with them so that when we do have projects that are ready that fit what they're looking for, there's already a good connection there and some trust, and we can work together.
All right, yeah. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. Where can our audience find you online?
Yeah, yeah. LinkedIn is probably the best place. Mike Parker, Logie Solar. Thanks for having me.
Of course, Mike, have a good one.
Thanks so much. Bye.